The reality is that the gangs still control California prison systems. The brand's number one currency is violence. You will not find another organization who is more violent. Been shot 22 times total, but I was at Folsom probably 12 times. There was an attempt to kill me, and that escalated into me smuggling a .38 Smith & Wesson into the institution. I had an individual who got unruly, and I had to put him in the hospital. I wouldn't stop until I was finished with what I was doing. Once the retaliation starts and life is taken, it's a life for a life, or 3 lives for a life.
Michael Thompson is one of the former leaders of the Aryan Brotherhood, the most ruthless, violent prison gang in the United States. In the early 1970s, Mike was convicted of a double homicide and sent to Folsom State Prison. By the time he got transferred out in 1978, he was making almost $4 million a year just off prison rackets alone. Drugs, liquor, loan sharking, even prostitution. He had the guards and the warden on his payroll and helped transform the Aryan Brotherhood from a small, disorganized prison car into a fully fledged criminal empire. Mike exposes the secrets of the mythological Aryan Brotherhood, reveals how it's changed from his era to the modern day, and how it continues to be the smallest yet most powerful criminal organization, not just in California, but throughout the entire federal prison system as well. After nearly 40 years behind bars, he is finally free and here to tell his story. Make sure to grab his autobiography, the first of a 3-part book series. We'll put a link to that in the description below, and check out a Patreon bonus episode that we did with him over at patreon.com/theconnectshow. All right, without further ado, it's the great Michael Thompson right here on The Connect with Johnny Mitchell. Do you feel sorry for anything that you did in terms of like violence when you were with the organization?
No,
not that you regret, but
I don't think that has value.
Oh, interesting.
I really don't. It's when you find yourself, when you make that decision, and it's a choice.
Yeah.
You see, I'm not one that pursues or seeks answers. I believe there are only choices. So that when I come upon a situation, I have a choice to make. I make that choice, right or wrong. You know, that really the moral aspect is irrelevant, particularly behind the iron gates, because survival is what's at stake. And so like any other animal, I'm going to pursue and I'm going to select for that which is conducive to my survival.
Well, and especially when you first went into the system in that era, it really was a deadly, deadly place to be, especially in California.
Yes. 70s, yes.
Yeah.
It was a completely different prison system. So you only had 2 prisons. You had Old Folsom and San Quentin. Then you had, I think, 7 institutions. They didn't even have wardens. So they were structured differently and they were run differently than Folsom and San Quentin. So,
what do you think about now and the fact that there were only, in a place as huge as California, there were only 2 real prisons, and 50 years later there's
33
prisons. Has crime gone down 33%?
No, it hasn't, and that's why you see prisons closing. So you've had, so far this year, 7 prisons close, and more on the way. And you can say that's as a result of the new deal that Governor Newsom has offered to the Department of Corrections, and so far as the California design is what it's referred to. I'm not a big fan of it. It has elements that I think do work, especially when you're talking about rehabilitation and the idea of programs that facilitate awareness, behavioral change, cognitive-based theories. I think those all have value, especially when you're dealing with gangs. But the reality is that the gangs still control California prison systems. And communities on the outside from those prisons. So that's pretty important. Until you begin to address that and deal with that, you're not going to be able to move forward progressively with corrections.
Right. Yeah. It's one extreme to the next.
That's the pendulum itself here in
Yeah.
California. It always has been. It runs in about a 20-year cycle. Swings one way and then it swings back the other, and there's this constant maneuvering to adjust, and the vicarious liability associated with that. So no, I don't. I'm not impressed with the system today. I think it needs a lot of work, and hopefully the political machine that exists here in California will continue to pursue advancements in that.
Well, I'm fascinated, and thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
I'm fascinated by you. I'm fascinated by how somebody who grew up on a native reservation, somebody who prays every morning and uses tobacco in a way that a Native American would use it to, as part of your spiritual being, how somebody like that could become a member of such a violent organization, and a racist one.
That requires clarification. It's racist now, but you mentioned a moment ago about the 70s and the difference in the prison system. So back then you had the Aryan Brotherhood, you had the Mexican Mafia, the La M. You had the Black Panthers, Black Guerrilla Family, the Texas Syndicate, the Nuestra Familia, and other Sudanese Liberation Army. We were all in Folsom together. And so the structure was completely different. It wasn't about racism, which isn't to say that there weren't blacks who tried to kill me simply because of my fair features. That's true. I can honestly say I've never attempted to kill a black man because of his skin pigmentation. But no, the idea back then was that the battles that occurred between the various organizations occurred because of resources and the control of those resources and the effective control of those resources. So that when you're dealing with an environment like Old Folsom or San Quentin, you're looking at a population that fluctuates between 3,000 and 5,000. That's a small city. And so the revenues associated with that can be enormous. In 1978, the FBI estimated that I took $3.5 million out of Old Folsom alone. Back in the 70s, that was a lot of money. And so it's a matter of what you do with that money. But to go back to your question, racism was not an element. You saw it amongst the Nation of Islam, the Blue-Eyed Devil, in some capacity. You saw it with the Black Guerrilla Family in some capacity. Black Panthers were more progressive in their thinking. They were actually the first ones that attempted to recruit me. And so that was kind of interesting.
For sure.
Yeah. So, the idea of the Aryan Brotherhood back then being a white supremacist group, no, that's not true. It is now and has evolved into that, by way of infrastructure and subculture and otherwise. But no, I was initially, the recruitment process from the Aryan Brotherhood with me was facilitated by T.D. Bingham. And I like the hell out of TD, still do. But I declined his offer. And it wasn't until 4 Native American members of the Aryan Brotherhood approached me and told me, said, look, brother, we live better in here than we ever did on the res. We know you're an old res dog. And I said, you're right. I said, but explain that to me. What do you mean? And so they did. We have 2 stills. We've got control over what most people refer to as concessions. So that would be commodities, in some capacity.
Booze.
Very lucrative. Prostitution, drug trafficking.
Alcohol?
Oh, yeah, certainly alcohol. That's a big factor.
Yeah, I've talked to people that said can be enormously profitable.
It is.
Behind the wall.
Yeah, especially if you have a still. And in Old Folsom, we had a still in the kitchen. And it was very effective. And then we had another still so that we could double distill and increase the alcohol content. So,
And narcotics, heroin?
You name it. Mexican Mafia primarily controlled black tar. Back in the 70s, you still had China White coming in from the Triangle out of Indonesia. And so that was still available. But primarily black tar. And remains that, except now that it's being laced with fentanyl it's a completely different animal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, drug trafficking and prostitution, of course, and then loan sharking, that's always a viable enterprise.
Totally.
And yeah, so it's just like any other city where you'll find organized crime. And that's the essence of what you found behind the iron gates was organized crime. And that would include administrators and staff and the gangs and you name it. Just like you find out here on the streets. You find corruption wherever you go, at every level. And usually that's associated with organized crime. So it was no different behind the iron gates. So the idea of racism didn't really enter the picture until much later, with the implosion of prison construction. So whereas you had 2 prisons and 7 institutions, you now have 33 prisons. When I came in, the population was 14,000. The population is now at 180,000. So that makes a big difference in the dynamic that we're talking about, where races don't interact and there's control over that for the purposes of controlling your race because of the revenues generated through that.
Right.
You see, if you allow another race to usurp that, then that's usually where the problems begin.
So the racial segregation is really a practical means of controlling the rackets.
It always has been.
Yeah.
Anytime that you look at racism, whether it's white supremacy or otherwise, you don't often hear about racism in the context other than white supremacy. But
no, it's true, but it exists.
Of course, the reality
everywhere,
is,
across every
I know
race.
racism as, given my fair features, having grown up on the reservation, I know racism from that perspective. Where I had natives beat the hell out of me because of my fair features, and of course their race memory. I don't fault them for that. But that's just another form of racism. So, but you don't really see it in the context of anything other than white supremacy in this country for a vast array of reasons. I mean, it's been entrenched in this country since its inception. 250 years now, and it's not going to change anytime soon because the dialogue hasn't reached a level as yet that is meaningful. So
I think we'll get there. Once we start having greater and greater problems, I think it's going to unite everybody and realize that racism is silly and we have a much greater enemy.
I think you may be right, but if you look at how divisive this country is right now, and at the forefront of that are militias and other hate groups that fundamentally represent white supremacy.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem. I mean, Joe Biden said it a few years back that the biggest problem facing this country right now is white supremacy. And I don't disagree with that, particularly as it relates to domestic terrorism. And that's a pet peeve with me. It goes back to the idea of when Yogi Pinnell first attempted to recruit me into the Black Panthers. Their foundation was communist. The manifesto was communist. And even though I didn't understand, I didn't have the intellectual ability back then to comprehend what communism was, I knew that I was American. And so I rejected the Black Panthers for that reason. But if you look at today and what is represented by various groups in some capacity, it doesn't matter what it is, you're always going to find that element of racism. And it's not just white supremacy. So if the dialogue is going to continue and if it's going to be effective and meaningful, and then it needs to be all-encompassing as it relates to that and not just a single focus on white people.
Totally agree. So you grew up on the reservation, a reservation. Tell us how you grew up and where.
It's the Big Pine Reservation. It's located at the base of Mount Whitney. And within the indigenous states, Mount Whitney's the highest peak at over 14,000 feet and maintains multiple glaciers, but it's wilderness. And, back then, this was in the 50s and 60s, it was tar paper shacks and dirt floors, and I slept underneath a 12-foot travel trailer, teardrop travel trailer for the first 12 years of my life. Knew nothing about hygiene or anything else, but it was about snaring rabbits and fishing and gathering and hunting and alcoholism.
Now, how can a white person grow up on a reservation, a Native American reservation?
Well, with difficulty. See, and that goes to that idea of racism and the race memory on the part of the natives. So the most dominant factor on the reservation is alcoholism and what that portends by way of unemployment and abject poverty. And it's extreme and was extreme. It's since changed with the development of casinos and otherwise, but back then it was abject poverty. So growing up, we had a school. It was called the Little Red House, and it was a red brick house that housed grades 1 through 12, and all in one room. And you would go in and you would check in, and then you would leave. And that was essentially it. So they met that requirement by way of the roll call, and that was it. But a lot of violence, a lot of domestic violence. You typically find that anywhere that you find alcoholism as prevalent as it was on the reservation, and still is on many reservations. So to answer your question, growing up on a reservation is very difficult. The presumption is that, that you're within this spiritual domain, that is rewarding and fulfilling, and none of that existed. You didn't have any ceremonies taking place. The people very rarely spoke their own language. I know my language. I was taught my language by my elder who raised me, but that was off the reservation.
So your first 12 years on the res, were you raised, are you an orphan?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. How did you end up there? And
That's where my mother left me with relatives.
Okay.
And so, that was the difficult thing. I was not wanted.
Right.
And, it, I suppose, could manifest into certain psychoses. In my case, I don't believe that it did. For me, it was just a simple matter of survival. So, we had many creeks, and up in that area there, you have a particular species of trout, cutthroat trout, that is only found there. So you got a lot of fishermen that come up, mostly white people, and they camp on the river. And back then they didn't have ice chests, but they used to keep everything in a net bag, put that in the ice cold water coming off the glacier. And so I would swim underneath the water, cut out the bottom of the bag, steal their food, bring it back, and distribute it. And, that's a point of survival.
Yeah.
So
you'd sell the fish?
No selling. It's just a matter of distribution to make sure everybody gets fed. I would go amongst the tar paper shacks, and, fry bread was the big thing.
Yeah.
And so, I would go to, say, Mother Jane's shack, and I would tell Mother Jane that I was hungry. So she would make me fry bread, but she already knew that I'd been to other shacks for fry bread that morning. And so she would make me the fry bread, and she would say, well, I know you were at Mother Mary's this morning. Did she make you fry bread? And I'd say, yes, Mother Jane. She said, is her fry bread better than my fry bread? I said, oh, no, Mother Jane. You see, and that's kind of your relationship, in that. There's a community, and particularly amongst the women, they always look out for the children in some capacity. So I was blessed in that, regardless of my fair features. The men, that's an entirely different story. That involved beatings and pretty severe beatings.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
you get jumped by the other kids for being white?
No.
Or beatings by grown men?
Beatings by grown men mostly. It's with the alcoholism. It's actually where I first had my initial revelation as it relates to who my family actually was. I was very young, and I had endured a severe beating at the hands of Native men who had gotten liquored up, and so I was able to get away from them, and I ran off into the wilderness, and I climbed up on these large boulders, the granite boulders, We refer to them as the rock people. Back then, I didn't know anything about that. But I had a sense as I was on top of these boulders, had my head thrown back, and I was attempting to stop the bleeding from my face and my nose. And, I had debris all over me, and I was crying and hiccuping. You know how that goes along with the crying as a child. And I heard the wind in the trees. And I had a sense that just as I was aware of my environment, the tree people, the rock people, all that surrounded me, it was aware of me. And that was my first sense of family. And I've never forgotten that. Wow. So it was a profound experience for me as a child, and it served me later on. You don't think about these things as a child. They just occur, and you don't store them away for future reference. It just is. But when I did go to live with my elder, and I began engaging in ceremony and learning my ways, that experience always came back to serve me as a foundation for my connection to the earth.
Wow. It's profound.
Well, it's really simple if you think about it. We all have that connection. We all come from indigenous backgrounds, all of us. And so it's just a matter of the ability to tap into that and, to walk essentially with your ancestors, and in that acquire knowledge.
Yeah. I just live in LA, and so instead of the sound of trees, it's buses and gunshots.
No, bigger than that. What fascinates me are all these cars driving around with nobody at the wheel.
It's
my first experience with it. And it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
One pulls up alongside you, and you can't help but look.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me, the technology.
Yeah, truly.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cash App. Cash App is the only app that I use to send and receive money. But check it out. They have evolved. They've upgraded, okay? They're not just a money transfer service anymore. Cash App can do way more than you think to make your money work for you. If you direct deposit at least $300 in paychecks each month and use the Cash App card for purchases, you can earn interest on your savings. No hidden fees, no minimum balance requirements. Also, you can hit your savings goals even faster by turning on roundups on your Cash App card. With roundups, every purchase you make using the card is rounded up to the nearest dollar, and that spare change is automatically put into your savings. It's like, remember when you used to put your change into that empty water jug? This is the same thing. Don't let your money sit around and gather dust. Make it work for you. Take advantage of interest savings on Cash App today. And as always, new Cash App customers can earn $10 if they use code CASHAPP10, that's Cash App 10, in their profile at sign up, and send $5 to a friend within 14 days. Terms do apply. Cash App is a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partners. Prepaid debit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Cash App Visa Debit Flex cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC, and the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to a license from Visa USA Inc. See terms and conditions for the Sutton Prepaid Card, Sutton Debit Flex Card, and Bancorp Debit Flex Card. Cash App Green features savings, direct deposits, roundups, overdraft coverage, and discounts provided by Cash App, a blocking brand. Visit cash.app/legal/podcast for full disclosures.
So you leave the res at 12. You go on the road with your elder?
I don't. I'm actually placed in a facility called Joplin Boys Ranch. That's up in Tabuco Canyon, or was. It's no longer existent. But so I was placed there at the age of 12, and I was the youngest person there. But it was a good experience. It was a wholesome environment. You lived in the old Quonset hut, Marine military Quonset huts, and you had a chow hall, and you had pigs, and you had cows. You had a milk barn, and so on. So you're milking cows, and you're slopping the pigs, and you're eating amazingly. I mean, when I went there, I weighed 120 pounds, and I was already over 6 feet tall. So within 8 months of being there, I put on 80 pounds. I'd never eaten like that before. Wow. So that was kind of nice.
So you were a huge kid.
I was, yeah. At the age of 13, I was already 220 and wasn't quite 6'4" yet. I was still 6'3". But eventually I was, grew to be 6'4". You're a tall man yourself, so you understand that process.
I've never been 220, though.
Yeah. I actually went up to 285. And in my prime, I weighed 310. So, but I was pushing a lot of iron.
Yeah.
But back on, in the ranch days, maintained 220, and I was a bull rider. I rode the rodeo circuit and trained horses And we had a small herd of cattle, and I worked for the Irvine Ranch for a while as their foreman, pushing cattle. And, you'd have your roundup every year, spring roundup, and we held that in Carbon Canyon. So that's actually how I got into the rodeo and bull riding. But, I went to live with my elder, and he was half Nez Perce, half Irish, and what they referred to as a man of spirit. His name was He Who Walks on Top of the Wind. I just called him Walks on Top. It was too much otherwise. But in 1940, he brought one of the first sires and broodmares, Arabian, out of Egypt to the United States and started his ranch up in the Cleveland National Forest. And from those 2 broodmares and that one sire, when I got there were 30 head. So, we continued the breeding program and working with the cattle. And he taught me horsemanship. Of course, he taught me hunting and fishing. But more importantly, he taught me my ways. He was a World War II veteran and a martial artist, and taught me martial arts. Primarily taught me that as a result of the injuries I had incurred on the reservation. And so he wanted to teach me how to fight, and did. And that was really the source of my survival, if you will, once I did go behind the iron gates. But an incredible man, very knowledgeable, very well-read, and his foundations were, of course, spiritual. And so I had the blessing of learning my ways from him, traveling in the United States, down into Mexico, up into Canada, in ceremony with him. And, that just stayed with me my entire life. So I refer to it as the Red Road. I've walked the Red Road. I grew up Native. People say, well, do you have any Native blood? And I say, well, I don't know. All I know is that in my heart, I am Native. I follow the Red Road. And like I said, we all come from indigenous backgrounds with our ancestors. So, given the fact that I am white, I suspect there's a Nordic component there. And if you look at, the Norse, or you look at the Irish or the Scottish, whatever it is, they have very similar native-based spirituality. And, they even had sweat lodges. So, the sweat lodge to me is, whether it's native or whether it's Scandinavian, really doesn't matter to me. What does matter to me is my connection to the earth and all my relatives, and, how I pursue that in my humanity.
Yeah. I mean, look, it didn't matter when the brand tried to recruit you.
No.
I mean, the Black Panthers tried to recruit you.
Well, they did.
Which is the most fascinating thing. Like,
not if you put it in context. I mean, I came from a prison where, I got into a huge altercation because of my Native beliefs. Back then, we couldn't speak our language or practice our ways. It was actually against the law.
What language was that?
Anishinaabe.
Okay. And that's of the Nez Perce?
No, it's Ojibwe.
Ojibwe.
Say, yeah, or Chippewa, depending on which side of the border you're on. Because it was against the law, I went to work for a chaplain at the institution I was at, and very progressive individual. And so I would clean his chapels. There was a Catholic chapel and a Protestant chapel, and there was a garden in between. And he allowed me access to that garden to practice my ways as long as I kept his chapels clean. And that went well until one day some individuals were let into the garden to kill me. And because my practices were perceived as devil worship. No one really had a real understanding of the Native perspective, Native philosophy or otherwise. So the only association they could make from a big white boy doing what I was doing was this must be devil worship.
Yeah, so it's crazy. We got to run him out. Yeah.
So there was an attempt to kill me, and that escalated into me smuggling a .38 Smith & Wesson into the institution with a box of cartridges And I even made a suppressor for it, even though a suppressor is kind of irrelevant when it comes to a revolver. But it looked good.
What'd you use as a suppressor?
I made it.
Out of what?
Fiberglass, a tube, and baffles. So I created baffles, inserted the baffles, fiberglass on top of that, and then it inserted over the barrel itself. So it's like shooting into a pillow.
Yeah.
Would be the best analogy of it. But typically a suppressor only works with an automatic. And but with a revolver, because you have your chamber, and so you're going to have the escape of gases, if you will, through the chamber itself. But it could have worked.
Oh, you didn't get a chance to use it?
No, actually, I was told on. The individual I had smuggled the gun in told on me, so they came into center corridor where I was standing at the time, and only time I've ever seen a weapon brought inside, but they put a shotgun in the back of my head, and 2 guards come up alongside me and cut my clothes off me. And of course, I didn't have the gun on me, so now they wanted the gun, and I had it in a number 10 can full of oil, because in the smuggling in process, it was buried on the dairy, and some moisture had gotten into the chamber and rusted it. So I had it in a barrel, a can of oil. And when this happened, so they put me in a car and they shipped me to Old Folsom, and that was where the big boys were at, and that's where my introduction to the Black Panthers and the BGF and the Aryan Brotherhood and Texas Syndicate and Charlie Manson and all of them occurred. So given the fact that I was involved in altercations at the prior institution based on my native beliefs, the inmate grapevine had carried that information to Folsom prior to me arriving. So the field marshal for the Black Panthers, who was Hugo Yogi Pinnell, approached me on my first day on the yard and attempted to recruit me. And that was the thing about the Black Panthers back then. They didn't care what your ethnicity was or your race. You know, they were looking for warriors. And given where I'd come from and the stories that preceded me, he was looking to recruit me as a warrior within the ranks of the Black Panthers. And I declined. And he and I ended up going head up the next day in a knife fight. And that was the first time I was shot. And because he ended up running from me when he began to lose the battle, the knife fight. And like a damn ass, I chased him and got shot in the process.
By the guard?
Yeah.
With the
M14.
Mini 14.
Yeah. So,
what kind of knives did you have in that area?
I had made
the big ones, or
no? I'd cut it from the pot iron in the cell, and I had been taught not only metallurgy but forging knives at the forge and otherwise. So when I cut it, I designed it specifically for the use I intended it, and that was a one-sided with the curve, and I always use it to the back of my hand as opposed to out in front of me. So it runs along the side of my forearm. Do you know what I mean?
Can you show me?
Sure. See how I'm holding the cane?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the knife handle and this is the knife blade. So I hold the knife blade here so that I still have use holding the knife handle of my fists or to strike, but I can use the knife this way, or if my opponent throws a knife strike at me, I can come over this way, pull him forward, and come over his wrist and bleed him. You see, so it's a simple procedure.
So you could really kill somebody. You could really open an artery, or
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and you can do it in such a way that it's irreversible. So he's going to bleed out.
You should have taught Rene Boxer Enriquez how to do that, because that guy stabbed like 30 people and killed none of them.
Yeah.
It's not easy to kill somebody with a prison shank if you don't know what you're doing.
That's the thing. You see, there's a lot of factors associated with that, and people automatically assume that because you make a move or you make a hit. And Rene's a good man and a good friend of mine.
Yeah, he told me.
By
Yeah,
the way,
I'm just kidding. You
no,
know, he was here yesterday.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, the idea of how you use a weapon is fundamental. You know, people think you just need to, stab at the chest area or whatever, but there's a number of ways depending on the knife that you have. You know, you can come up underneath the rib cage, into the heart itself. You can pop along first from the side, and then bring it over. You can use a neck piece to the throat, take the jugular along with the windpipe, depending on the circumstances. But that requires a knowledge of knife fighting and human anatomy. And most people who are trained in association with the gangs don't have that knowledge. So many of the stabbings that occur are not successful as it relates to killing your opponent. And then, of course, if your approach is to assassinate, that's an entirely different thing, too, as opposed to back in my day, we had head up, like Yogi and I, and even though it was under the gun. But
do you think you would have killed him if he had just stayed? Like, were you getting the best of him, or would you have let him off?
I've never had to take it upon myself to kill an opponent, even though I could have. And that's a choice. My perspective as a warrior is that a warrior is not that individual who has the capacity to kill, but rather that individual who has the capacity to kill and chooses not to because he realizes he doesn't need to. He can subdue his opponent without having to kill him.
That's actually more powerful.
I think so. That's how I was taught, and that's what I believe. So that's a critical element of my own self-efficacy as it relates to being a warrior. You can take various constructs like Bushido, and you can incorporate those and make them your own, and that is another element of self-efficacy. But it's designer-specific to the individual as it relates to that individual's construct of what it is to be a warrior.
So let's back up a little and tell us how you got to prison in the first place, how you became incarcerated. That
was a double homicide, and that occurred when I was 20 years old. It was two individuals that were attempting to kidnap two little girls for ransom. Their father was the head of a drug cartel, and they knew that he kept large sums of money in his home. He had two children, two young daughters, and these two individuals were out on federal bail for drug trafficking. Their intent was to kidnap the two little girls for ransom and abscond to Canada with the ransom. In the course of that attempt, they were disarmed. One had a .357 Magnum, the other had a double-barreled sawed-off shotgun, and they were killed and buried. And I was convicted of that and went to prison.
What was your sentence?
It was 7 years to life. It was under the old structure. So I was eligible for parole in 1979. I went in 1973. But I was not released until essentially 2020.
Right. Okay, so we're going to talk about that whole journey. But do you think if back then they were paroling guys that had life, I believe, right? If you had,
Well, back then, the sentencing structure, you didn't have the the determinate sentencing structure that you have today. That was Senate Bill 42 that facilitated that. And what it did was that prior to its enactment, everybody was serving a life sentence. But vast majority were serving 1 to life, 5 to life, or 7 to life. And as such, everybody was required to go before the Board of Prison Terms, which is what it was called back then. And they had to be eligible for parole in the eyes of the board before they would be released.
But they were releasing people.
Oh, yes.
Because now, it might have changed now, because as you said, the pendulum has kind of swung the other way. But for many, many years, I believe if you had 15 to life, 20 to life, whatever, you go before the board and they would just deny you.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it came to. But back then, not so.
Right.
So, you would go before the board. I mean, I remember that when I was in San Quentin in the adjustment center at the time, that was the overflow for death row. I'd been on death row, but had come down into the adjustment center, into the overflow area of the adjustment center. And so what had happened was when SB 42 was enacted, they were so far behind in the release of prisoners that they did a wholesale release as a result. So where I was at They came in one morning and they walked down the tier and they were just pointing to cells and say, roll it up, roll it up. Everybody jumped up and said, where are we going? They thought they were being transferred. Said, it's called a RUAP, immediate release. So everybody on the tier I was on was released. I was the only one left. So, they'd say, roll it up. Hell, open the door. Let me out. They left all their stuff in their cells. And 400 guys that morning walked out of San Quentin.
Wow.
Yeah.
They probably thought it was a mistake, and they were like,
well,
let's just
let
get
me out.
out of here.
That was the whole idea. I'm not packing a thing.
Yeah.
And they were released, and that a lot of public outcry over that. But once the dust settled, then they moved into this indeterminate term, determinate term situation. So now you had individuals such as myself who had a 7 to life that still had to appear. The 1 to life and 5 to life were eliminated. But those of us who had 7 to life still had to appear before the board and did.
Right.
So, and we're lifers. All of us were lifers. So 7 to life.
So you're considered a lifer in 1973, even though you're eligible for parole in 7 years.
Yes.
How did you look at it when you went in? Did you think, well, yeah, let me just keep my head down and I'll be able to get out of here, in a decade?
I wasn't that intelligent. That would require, I think, an experienced intellect, especially as it relates to the prison system and legal system, and I was neither. I was green. I was a fish.
Yeah.
And it showed. So, I'd run the mountains my whole life. Now suddenly I find myself incarcerated, and being in a cage is very difficult. And it was for me. So,
Yeah, we don't fit on the beds.
There's that.
Did you find that to be disheartening?
Yes. No, that didn't bother me a lick. It was being confined to a cage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because your childhood, even though it was poor, it was such freedom.
Yes. And even with my elder, you see, it's ranch life. So, you're riding horses every day, you're moving cattle, you're training horses, you're rodeoing, you're bucking hay, you're mucking out stalls, you're stringing line for the fence.
Yeah.
The only time we ever went into the city from the ranch was to buy chewing tobacco and to purchase bags of grain for the horses.
Yeah.
So that was from a feed store that was just at the outskirts of the foothills.
Right.
So
you had a hard time at the beginning when you first went in, psychologically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. I think had it not been for my spiritual beliefs, it could have turned out differently because it's the only time in my life that I contemplated suicide. I just told myself there's no way I can do this. I cannot live in this cage. It's so contrary to who I am as a human being. So in that contemplation, in the construction of the cells, they use a lot of aggregate stones. And there was one protruding from the wall up toward the ceiling, and the rock people are one of my totems. And so I went up and I put my hand on that rock, and it fortunately spoke to me. And it just said, "It's going to be all right, little one."
Wow.
And that was enough for me.
Wow.
So, with that spiritual foundation, that was enough. So essentially I just had to man up.
Yep.
And in that, assert my perspective. I'm an alpha male. I've always been an alpha male. And that's organic. It's not something that's contrived, has nothing to do with posturing. And so I asserted that perspective as an alpha male.
Have you ever left a doctor's appointment feeling totally unsatisfied? Yeah, like every time. They glance at your basic labs, say you're fine, tell you to drink more water, and they send you on your way with zero real answers. I've definitely been there, and that's why I'm so excited about Superpower. With just one simple blood draw done at home or by a licensed professional at a local lab, Superpower gives you over 100 biomarkers. 100. That's way beyond your typical physical. You get deep insights into what's going on in your body, your heart, metabolism, thyroid, inflammation, toxins, and more. They calculate your real biological age, factor in your family history and past labs, then deliver a personalized protocol with supplement recommendations and prescription options you can actually buy right through them. The best part? It tracks everything over time so you stop guessing and start proactively optimizing your health. Superpower makes concierge-level health accessible, starting at just $199, and it's HSA and FSA eligible. So take control of your health today. Head to superpower.com and use our promo code CONNECT to get $20 off your membership. Unlock your new health intelligence with 100 plus biomarkers every year. And when they ask you how you heard about them, tell them that the Connect sent you to support our show. Go to superpower.com and use code CONNECT. Your body will thank you.
So you get to Old Folsom. Mm-hmm. It was just Folsom back then.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't have New Folsom.
Right.
So it was just called Folsom. And you reject the Black Panthers violently.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You get shot. Tell us your progression and how you eventually came to know who you have tattooed on your finger, the Irish clover leaf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the Aryan Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Yep.
That came as a result of T.D. Bingham approaching me. Along the same lines as Yogi had. However, the difference was that each time I went out to the yard now, I was engaging in combat with either a Black Guerrilla family member or a Black Panther member because of what had occurred with Yogi. Mm. And there was actually a split between the two because they were pretty much unified at that time because he had run from me. And, of course, he had taken a guerrilla perspective in that live to fight another day. And you'll see that amongst most militia and guerrilla outfits. So in TD's case, he had observed me each time I'd come out to the yard, engage in battle successfully.
And are these with knives or just fists?
Knives, typically.
Okay.
And
did you get poked at all?
No, I got shot a lot. I've been shot 22 times total, but I was at Folsom probably 12 times. And
where?
Well, you want to remember that old Folsom, they shoot from a 50-foot wall, and they shoot down. So most of my injuries are at the top of my back, mm-hmm. and you can see the entry wounds. Most of them have exit wounds because the 223 was developed as a sniper weapon, and then it evolved into a much hotter weapon. But it's still meant to go pass through you. Mm. When it was developed originally as a sniper weapon, it was meant to pass through you so that people would come out to get the person, and then they could snipe more people. In this case, pretty hot rounds, and they typically pass through you, and in my case did with one exception. And I had one lodged next to my spine, and they didn't remove that for 30 years. Mm. And then the rest were shotgun blasts. At Old Folsom, they still used, in some instances from the towers, like in this case, Tower 2, an .6, and that was just with a gold shear bead and a full buckhorn sight. And I took a shot to the leg with that. Kind of an interesting story. It was a cat named Talbot, and he'd shot me. I was in a fight with one of the Soledad Six, one of the Rowland brothers. Mm. They'd killed the guards at Soledad, and they were at Folsom, and he and I were going head up. And anyway, I took a shot to the leg, and it dropped me. And, back then they just took you to the clinic, and they probed the wound, stuffed it. And if it hadn't hit anything vital, where I was shot, you have those primary arteries.
Right.
So that's what they were looking for. It didn't hit that. And so I hear somebody pound on the bar box, and my cell door opens, and Talbot steps into my cell. And he looks down at me. I'm on my bunk, and he says, "Are we all right?" And I said, "You the one that shot me?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, you were just doing your job, and I was doing mine." I said, "But I got to tell you, man, you see, Tower 2's quite a ways out there, and it was a hell of a shot." And so I told him that. I said, "That was a hell of a shot." And he says, "No, not really." He says, "I was aiming for your head." and he'd hit me in the leg. So, and
So you lucked out. Why were you the one getting shot? Is that because you were winning the knife fights?
typically, yes. When you're winning, as you say, the fight, and then you're the target.
Even though you were technically the victim, you're the one.
It's not really so much being a victim. I've never thought of myself in that context.
I guess you're not initiating these head-ups, are you?
It's mutual.
Okay.
You know you're going out there to fight. You know, it's just who you're going to fight today is really what it comes down to.
So after your 12th, 20 or 22nd time getting shot, why not just go to like the shower? There's no cameras.
Well, you don't have showers in those settings that you can frequent together.
The kitchen.
You don't have a kitchen. You're fed in cell.
Okay, so so you're already in special.
Oh yeah,
the shoe.
You're in the hole.
Okay.
See, they don't have a shoe then.
Right.
No such thing exists. They only developed those later in the 80s.
I see. So
Back then you had the adjustment center, and then you had what they called 4A in Old Folsom, which was the hole. And then you're in a strip cell, so you got a hole in the floor, and that's essentially it. You have double bars, and then you have an area in between, and they have plates they have windows to the outside of the cell with another door. They put those plates up so that you're in complete darkness. And so, that's an experience in and of itself. Each time you get shot, your body goes into shock, so you can't move. But they have a slot in the bottom where they come back then. They would feed you on a tray, and they would slide the tray up underneath. And, in my case, you would roll over and put your face in the food because you couldn't lift your arms. And you'd eat what you could, and then you'd roll back over. And when I say roll back over, it wasn't that immediate. It would take you about an hour and involve a lot of exertion. So, but you couldn't lift your hand to wipe the food off your face, so the cockroaches would come out of that sewer hole in the floor and eat the food off your face. And they were 2 to 3 inches, pretty big. And so you adjust to that. I mean, just a cockroach. Mm-hmm. But
and how long are you kept back there? Like, how long is a whole shot for?
That was
getting
my
in a
cell.
knife fight?
I spent a year at a time.
So you're in this kind of nightmare where you go to the hole because you're fighting and you get shot, or you stab a guy, and then because you stabbed him, now somebody else wants some smoke. So when you get out, you have to fight again. You get shot, and it's just over and over.
Yeah, it's a matter of honor. They had to attempt to redeem. The
You can't let a white boy beat you, especially not as a black guy back then. That was bad luck.
That's very true.
Yeah.
You see, so that's the context, and you have the context appropriate.
Can you sue? Like now people would get sued if they got shot by a prison guard.
I reckon you can. Back then, no. Okay. It wasn't even a thought.
Right.
Being
litigious. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you were doing what you were doing. Like I told him, that's where Talbot come up. He told me, I told him, you were just doing your job, I was doing mine, and that's how you looked at it.
Yeah.
If I had a beef with a guard, there was always an empty cell on the tier, even in a hole. And if I thought he had disrespected me, or he thought vice versa, he would take his badge off and his Sam Brown, and they'd bring me out, and we'd go in that cell, and they'd shut the door, and we'd get down. Yeah. And no more was said about it, whoever won. Wow. So they'd open the door. There was no write-up. There was no taking issue with him. That was the end of it.
You guys were men.
Mano
it was
y
just
mano.
men.
Yeah. Men on men.
Yeah.
So.
So how did you get out of this situation? How were you able to move on from this constant battling with the blacks?
You don't move on, you escalate it. And in my case, once I did join the Aryan Brotherhood, I initially had declined TD's offer, but I was approached by 4 Native Americans who were AB, Brand. And they told me, I said, look, brother, we know you're an old res dog, and we live better in here than we ever did on the res. Now, that resonated with me. I said, what do you mean? So they explained it to me, and so I said, okay, I'm in. So from that, within a year, I had advanced to a leadership role based on essentially nothing more than my physical prowess and my ability to fight. And so with that, I got together with TD and we started talking about restructuring, creating an infrastructure, taking the monies that were being created within the prison itself and applying that more business-like, creating that business infrastructure. Because back then, very few members, all of them were strung out. So all the money that was being generated was being used to party, to live large, as they say now. Yeah. And I don't use drugs. I never have.
Yeah.
Didn't drink. I'll now kick back a shot of bullet on occasion, but other than that, back then I never drank. And so the idea was to give it that formal infrastructure. So we started working on that. And meanwhile, I was educating myself. I'd learned to read. I'd learned to write. I started writing articles for Field and Stream and Outdoorsmen and Horsemen. And each time I sold an article, I would buy a college course. And eventually I started off at Berkeley in my undergraduate studies as a biologist. And then I advanced from there to Ohio University for my graduate studies. Again, paying my own way.
Right.
And
so they would just mail you the workload for the semester?
It was all correspondence. When I went into my doctoral program, I had to have advisors. So that required a sponsorship, essentially because of where I was at. But I did have advisors. I had, of all people, Linus Pauling and Ed Hoffman. Linus Pauling was a 2-time Nobel laureate and a brilliant, brilliant man. So, I had that help. And but yes, it was, to answer your question, other than my my doctoral advisors, it was all correspondence. The exams, the final exams were always proctored. We used, at the time that I completed that, I was already away from the brand, but so we used numerous aliases because of my protection and all that. But I did complete everything that I set out to do. I received my first PhD in 1988, my second PhD in 2000.
Wow.
So,
I mean, imagine you getting a degree in biology around the kind of people that are at Folsom.
Yeah.
You must have had to just keep a lot to the vest, as we say.
Yeah, you do. But it depends on how you use that. And of course, there's always an ulterior motive when in the pursuit of education behind the iron gates. It wasn't about being a biologist. The thing to remember that in the pursuit of that higher education, there's really no value in it other than a piece of paper.
Right.
The only thing I actually learned from the pursuit of higher education was how to do research. So I used that ability to research the law, to research physics. Quantum physics has always been a favorite field of mine, but that's how I ended up beating the metal detectors in Old Folsom. When they brought the metal detectors in, it was simple physics, that allowed me to run tests. I used Charlie Manson's girls to run out to the San Francisco airport and test my theories, and they worked. So then I started smuggling buck knives in and 5-shot Derringers, 38 Derringers.
Okay, so tell us about that. Tell us about the physics of that. How does a buck knife not go off in a metal detector?
Yeah, in this case, it's really simple physics. So all metal detection is predicated upon electrical eddies. So you have a transmitter. It sends out electrical eddies at a right angle, and it's called an electrical flux or magnetic flux. And those electrical eddies are contained within that flux. So it goes across to a receiver. And as you walk through, if you have no metal on you, it passes through you and hits the receiver and you're okay to go. But if you have any iron on you, the electrical eddies penetrate that iron, thus disrupting the magnetic flux and setting off the alarm. It's that simple. So that if you take any alloy and you insulate that with electrical tape, and that's what I used initially, I used a specific weave to prevent electrical eddies from penetrating into the metal object. And so you could walk right through with a buck knife or a gun or a handcuff key or whatever it may be. And it's really that simple. Now they use scanners, and those can be beat also, but there's a different model. involved in that because of what they use, the technology they use.
How big is a buck knife?
Well, a buck knife open is 8 inches, but when you close it, it's 4 inches.
Okay.
A little over 4 inches, about 4.5.
And how do you get that into the facility?
That's the keister stash. So I
Got
have
it.
Charlie's girls stash it actually vaginally and bring it in. And then I'd have them leave it with the porter for the visiting room because I was behind glass. And then when I would come out to be processed in, I would use it, and then you keister stash it, and then bring it in.
And then the Derringers, same thing?
Same thing, yeah.
Okay. Tell us what a Derringer, just for the camera.
Yeah, it's very small. Freedom Arms uses one. They have a single shot breakdown that you can use, 38, and it's stainless steel, 440 stainless steel. So the alloy is such that it doesn't have a lot of iron in it. But you insulate that the same way. It's a little bit bigger than a buck knife in width, so it's a little bit more difficult to keister stash.
Sounds like it hurts, man.
It does. You know, that's something that as a human being you have to get over because that's about survival. And we used to call it the vault. So that if you go to the vault with something, you know, it can be a stainless steel garrote, which we use for, of course, strangulation. It can be a gun. It can be a buck knife. It can be a handcuff key, you know, or it can be all of the above.
And how many shots does a little Derringer hold?
Usually single shot,
Yeah.
but actually they make one that is a 5 shot, but that's a different critter.
When you put it in the vault, are you sticking it up high enough in you to where if you get strip searched, they're not going to find it if you have to cough? Or if you have to cough, it's going to come out?
Well, that's understanding human anatomy. So you're looking at the anus, of course, and that, you know, prior to entering that cavity, you have 2 sphincter muscles.
Right.
And so it's a matter of going past those, and then the rectum holds it itself, just like a vault.
Right.
So the only problem there is given the weight, for instance, of a buck knife or a Derringer, it's going to put pressure on those sphincter muscles. And as such, you have to clench to hold that so that when you squat and cough, that its value really in a strip search is psychological more than anything else. It really doesn't work. It's not like when a person bends over and coughs that, you know, whatever they have secreted within their rectum is going to pop out. That doesn't happen. So it's more psychological than anything else. And in a strip search...
Oh, you mean it's psychological from the guard's perspective,
Yes.
making you strip search?
Yes.
It's just humiliation?
Yes.
Okay.
So, you know, what the guard may look for if he's got any wits about him is telltale signs of petroleum jelly, the smell of lotion, something like that.
Okay. Wow. So you would know how to keister a gun, cough, but whilst holding it
Yes.
above your sphincter muscles.
Yes.
Okay. And was anybody shot in the course of doing this? Was anybody ever assassinated with a Derringer?
No. We had 2 Derringers at the time. Wendell Norris, Blue, had one, and I had one. I retained mine until I stepped away from the brand. Blue used his in an escape attempt. Driving down the freeway, he pulled it out on the 2 guards that were escorting him, and they bailed out of the car, and the car went down the freeway, and of course, that foiled the escape attempt.
Right.
So those are the only 2 instances that I'm aware of. And I had made what are referred to as zip guns, you know, in the hole. 1975, they gave us TVs, black and whites. There was a 300 ohm connection that transferred to a 75 ohm coaxial connection, and that would chamber a 22 round perfectly. So it was a matter of gutting that, acquiring a cross pin that most guards used in their Class A's, and that would chamber a 22 perfectly. So you attached that cross pin to the coaxial connection, and then the nut came off. That chambered the 22 round. The pin was the barrel, and then you created from your plastics, which were usually cassette tapes Back then it was 8-track cassettes. So you would carve the plastic to create a platform for that. And then you would take the 3-piece razors that they allowed back then. You put the screw in it. You hone that down. That became your firing pin. And you would put a cross piece on that from the clip on the pin. And that would be on a plastic slide with rubber bands. And it would fire. It wasn't very accurate, but if you were from you to me, it was effective. And that was used.
That's genius.
Not really. It's just, it's convict ingenuity. You see,
It's a form of genius.
it can be
Ingenious.
considered that. Okay.
We'll call it ingenious.
All right. I'll buy
You
that.
grant me that?
Yeah.
So it sounds like most of your studies and your higher education was in pursuit of practical purposes.
Depends on who you ask. But yes. Yes.
So going back to the mid-'70s, you talk about building up the infrastructure of the brand. Can you talk about what some of that infrastructure was?
Sure. To use Charlie's term, helter-skelter would be the most appropriate definitive answer. So that you had no accountability is really what it comes down to. So you had a lot of things going on, drug trafficking, alcohol, prostitution, but the revenues generated from that typically were to purchase product that you would again sell, but you would clip that, and the membership would party. So, of course, they were all living large in their cells. Anything that they could have at that time, they had. But mostly it was about the use of drugs. So, you know, that multiplies very quickly. You had a very low membership at that time. But you figure within the course of a very short time, $100,000 is not much to go through by way of that habit. You know, when you're using large quantities of the drug on a daily basis. And then, of course, the party extends to your associates and those individuals that you're using. In other words, if I had associates in all the clerical positions within the institution so that I could monitor what was going on in the warehouse and otherwise in the kitchen to bring commodities in like sugar for the stills and otherwise, and then you're going to kick them down. They're going to get a percentage of what you have coming in. So, but there was no organization to that.
Right.
It was just, here, bro, and you kick them down. Kick them down a gram, kick them down an ounce, whatever it may be. That adds up very quickly. So the infrastructure construct was to take what was going on and now apply accountability to it so that a large portion of the revenues coming in were now going into accounts that were then going to be used towards acquiring businesses on the street, houses for the family, vehicles for the family, bank accounts for the family, and so on.
Right.
So
in the way that Boxer Enriquez sort of was on the forefront of taking Lame from just a prison gang to now having this synergy with the street and the taxing of drug dealers in greater Los Angeles, sounds like you kind of did that with the brand.
I did, except what you're talking about with Renee is more sophisticated because of what it involves and what it entails.
Sure.
Not only by way of population, but population dynamics. And, you know, Renee came after me, and in those years, that taxation became huge by way of generating revenues.
Right.
So it was control over a populace of subsets of organized crime, if you will. In my day, you didn't have those subsets. They were generated later through the Nazi lowriders, for instance, NLR, and PNI and other organizations. So
What's PNI?
That PNI is out of Orange County.
Okay.
And white supremacist group.
Okay.
You know, that's how, you know, when we talk about the evolution of white supremacy within the brand, when I started, the white supremacy didn't exist.
Right.
It evolved into that as a result of the creation of vanguards for the Aryan Brotherhood. And those vanguards, like the Nazi lowriders, were put out front and, in essence, were an expendable resource.
So kind of like what the Sureños are
Yes.
to the LM, that's what the Nazi lowriders
That's
and
right.
groups like them are to the brand.
It's the effective utilization of your resources. And in that, you always have an expendable factor. That's just the reality of it.
And the Aryan Brotherhood is, even today, I believe, much smaller in numbers
Yes.
than LM.
Yes.
How many, at the time, in the 70s, how many members were there?
10.
10
Yes.
in the whole damn organization.
Yeah.
And were they all at Folsom?
No, you had a couple at San Quentin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barry Mills, probably the most famous brand guy.
Barron was at San Quentin, then he went into the feds.
Okay.
TD, certainly his equal, by way of influence and otherwise, was at Old Folsom. Eventually, when they kicked TD and I out of Old Folsom and sent us to San Quentin, Barron had just left and gone into the feds, and then TD and I were at San Quentin. But we only had, at that time, 2 members at San Quentin.
So with such small numbers, like minuscule numbers, why, first of all? I mean, I know there's probably more Latinos overall as a population in California prisons, but there's still a lot of white guys.
Yeah.
Why are your numbers so small? Is it because it's harder, you have more rigorous standards for who becomes a member, or?
It's not a question of rigorous standards. It really goes to the caliber of individual. And if you want to equate that to rigorous standards, you can. But it was more looking at the caliber of the individual. That goes back to the idea of your question about infrastructure. So that in bringing an individual into the brand, that was based primarily on his physical prowess, but also his ability to go to any institution that he might go to and control that institution by himself. You see, and the way that you do that is through currency. And the brand's number one currency is violence. You will not find another organization who is more violent. As a matter of fact, they're infamous for it.
Of course.
So, and that's their foundation, really, is that currency is violence.
Do you think that you were more violent even at the time when you started with them than the average gang member?
I had the capacity for violence because of my training in martial arts and knife fighting in general. My elder taught me both. So not only that, but how to make a knife. So, that's an attribute that would be looked upon favorably. So, yeah, it certainly had nothing to do with a perceived intellect on my part, because that didn't exist at that time. As I began to read more and write more and educate myself, that evolved so that I was able to use that in developing that infrastructure. But the infrastructure itself, when it came into place, you went from the idea of the origins of the AB and why they formed and the caliber of individual associated with that, to not requiring an individual that was recruited into the AB to get his bones, as the term goes, blood in, blood out type thing, but rather to recruit that individual that had a capacity for clerical work or finance or trafficking or prostitution, and focus on that and only that, not put the knife in the hand of an individual that doesn't have the ability to use it, but still has value to the organization.
Right. And that makes more sense in your eyes, right?
Of course.
Like, you don't have to be so violent anymore. You guys already made your stamp, your
Yes.
mark. Now
Yes.
let's get a guy in here that's
It
a
comes down-
whiz with accounting.
That's it. It's the effective utilization of your resources. Any business endeavor is going to incorporate that of necessity if they want to be successful. So that if you only have one currency, you see, then when you expand on that, now you're drawing from additional resources by way of currency. So now I have a very intelligent person that knows his way around the prostitution ring or the loan ring or whatever it is, and he's now viable as it relates to his service to the organization.
And will you actually make him a member,
Yes.
even though he's not really a killer?
Doesn't have to be a killer. You see, you have what were developed, call them enforcers. So you have those individuals that, he still needs to know how to fight. I taught a lot of men how to fight that didn't know how to fight. And you'll find in general that most men don't know how to fight.
Right.
They know how to, what's the term, brawl maybe?
Yeah.
At their best.
Right.
So, a lot of the films that you see, where these guys come up and they're fighting and they're stabbing somebody, it's not very effective. When you have to stab a man 101 times to kill him, that's not efficiency.
Right.
See, and you're certainly not going to get away with it.
Right.
So the idea is that, if you're going to do something like that, ideally, you don't want it to come back on the organization. You don't want it to intrude or impede upon your business activities.
Yeah.
So you want to get away with it.
So you guys aren't sending people out on these like dummy missions, if you can help it.
No.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You want to remember that anytime violence is involved, it intrudes upon business. And if business is your focus, as opposed to just violence for the sake of violence, or if you are indeed racist and you're only killing blacks because they're black, then business doesn't matter. And that's my point relative to the organization not being racist.
Yeah.
You see, personally, of course you had racists. I've known black racists and Mexican racists. It's really irrelevant, to business.
Right. The brand is driven by business.
Right.
You said by the time you left Folsom, 1978 or something, you had like $3.5 million. That is, it's incredible. First of all, how does that work?
Insofar as the generation of that revenue?
The generation of that revenue and where you store it.
You don't store it, you invest it.
There you go.
It's like any other investment, or any other business that invests in its infrastructure. There are a number of ways to do that, not the least of which is the stock market, but also legitimate enterprise. That's taking a page out of the the Italian mafia's organization. See, so it's the investment of that, but also the investment towards the family structure, and the resources necessary to ensuring that the families are taken care of, provided for, have houses to live in, vehicles to drive, bank accounts to draw from. The children are being cared for, and so on. That's a warrior's first responsibility. People think that to be a warrior is that ability for physical prowess. It's not. Within the context that we're talking about now, it's to provide and protect. And
so that really is some old school Italian mafia kind of thinking, is everybody's family is careful.
Yeah, its origins aren't really with the Italian mafia. You can go back to Machiavelli, you can go back to Sun Tzu and von Clausewitz and Nietzsche and you name it, and you're going to find elements, the Übermensch as it relates to Nietzsche and what that means, Bushido as it relates to the Japanese and what that means, Masucci and his school of two swords. Those are all elements that carry over into what it is to be a warrior. And, the Italian mob doesn't have a handle on that and never has had. They were perhaps one of the first ones, not the first. You had your Irish mobs, in New York, prior to Sicilians coming in and establishing themselves, who had that same infrastructure. So, no, but the idea is that, believe it or not, it's about community. And it's important.
And what kind of legitimate businesses were you investing in?
Boat manufacturing would be one of the first ones that come to mind, that immediately comes to mind down in Long Beach. And, taking individuals that parole and putting them to work, in that. And so, building that, you have meat packing houses, slaughterhouses, different things, that the Italian mob utilized, same thing. You have, when you align yourselves with certain individuals, particularly within the Jewish community. Now you're getting into merchants and, what that merchandise is, whether it be jewelry, diamonds, or textiles, whatever it is. But it's about investments. And then, of course, the stock market itself, blue chip stocks and otherwise.
Tell us about the Rackets. You're obviously making tons of money with the stills, with the prison liquor.
Narcotic trafficking is your biggest.
Yeah.
But you're also making it in prostitution, loan sharking. That loan sharking can go outside families of individuals that are incarcerated. So
right.
at a pretty high percentage.
So you're lending money to people on the street.
Oh, of course.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And what are you charging them? What's a interest rate on that?
Depends on the family dynamic. So it's important to be mindful of that. You never want to put a person in a situation where they're unable to repay it. The thing about that is that there's a barter system associated with that I always thought was important. So that if the family is not able to pay it, now this individual owes me, now he's going to do what I need him to do to pay off his debt for his family. His family will continue to be taken care of in that, but now he's working for the organization.
Right.
And as such, that's pretty wide open. That can be a torpedo mission. That can be any number of things. That can be bringing product into the facility, utilizing his family in that capacity. There are a number of things that come into play.
And did you guys have your own narcotics sources, or were you mostly dealing with the Mexicans for that? Or did you have your own outside
Only
connections?
The Mexicans as it relates to black tar. And Joe Morgan had excellent connections as it relates to that, and was the primary supplier of black tar in that capacity. Methamphetamine came through our association with the Hells Angels. So Sonny Barger, an old friend, and others, they were paying taxes inside at that time, which is another way of saying they were paying protection.
Right.
But many Hells Angel members became Aryan Brotherhood members. Then when they would go back out, they'd put their Hells Angel patch back on. But there was a lot of development in that area. So methamphetamine. So by way of example, at Old Folsom, you would pay a guard who was making minimum wage at that time. They had no union to speak of, and they certainly didn't have peace officer status. So to give that guard $10,000 a pop to bring product in was a lot of money. You see, and to pay the warden $50,000 a pop to allow his guard to bring that in, you see, that's how it works. So that's the dynamic at play. And
did you set that up? Did you go to the
Yes.
warden at Folsom?
Yeah.
And that is something that I always find enviable, is how you work up the balls to make that pitch.
I don't know that it really requires that. It is, as long as you keep it within a business structure. See, it's looking, now oftentimes it isn't to say that we wouldn't use extortion, and did. I can think of one lieutenant that, he was a whorehound. And so, he liked those whores. So set him up in a hotel and you film it. And
Now we got you.
and he's married. So, and he's also, at that middle level echelon within the department.
Right.
So, that becomes extortion. And so you do have that in play.
Right.
In this case with the warden, no. It was simply a matter of economics.
How did you get to him? Tell us about how you did that.
I invited him to my cell and poured him a shot of wild turkey. And and the conversation began from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you paid him 50 G's to basically allow you guys to pay the guards. And now things are rocking.
Yeah. You'll find that most of your corruption, even to this day, is linked to either a liaison to the warden or something similar.
Is that right?
Oh, yes.
So it's not just a one-off with a rogue guard.
Back then, I could approach the warden. He would walk the tier. You see, he would walk the yard.
So he got to know personally.
So I would
his
say, hey,
inmates.
Art, why don't you come on in for a minute? Let me talk to you. And so they'd rack the door, and he would come in, and he'd sit down, and I kept a supply of whiskey in my cell. And I also had CB radios in there. But so, I'd pour him a drink and then we'd talk business. And back then you could do that because you didn't have the oversight that you have now.
Mm-hmm.
And the warden, if he told somebody, get off the tier, they got off the tier. If he wanted to walk hand in hand with me, he could, without any problems, without any repercussions, without any scrutiny.
Yeah.
Now that's not the case. You have liaisons, and they protect the warden. He doesn't even walk the yard. He doesn't walk the tier unless there's an entire entourage with him. And that has to do with vicarious liability.
Yeah.
So, most of the things that exist today are the product of vicarious liability and the lawsuits associated with that.
Right. And the behavior of inmates during that era.
Yeah.
That too.
There's a difference between an inmate and a convict.
A convict, I'm sorry.
It's all right. You don't need to apologize. I'm just making that distinction because it's an important one. In dealing the way that we dealt with the administration back then, you were a convict and recognized as such, and were actually trusted as such. If you gave your word, that was good enough.
Right.
When I stepped away, I didn't throw everybody to law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
You see, I didn't give up the warden. I didn't give up the guards. No value in that, and I wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You see, when I stepped away, I did cooperate with law enforcement, but that was toward those individuals who were taking innocent life, in my opinion, killing women and children, elders. I don't hold with that. I'll never hold with that. But insofar as, them, tell us who the family members are. No, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what the warden did. That's not going to happen.
You guys made money together,
Yes.
and that's how you're going to keep
It's
it.
business.
Yeah.
Absolute no value in destroying that man's life or his family or otherwise because of what was occurring behind the iron gates.
Yeah, and plus, look what he helped you do.
Yes.
You're a wealthy man now at 26 years old.
But it's more than that. You gave your
27.
word.
That's right.
You see, and that's important. And the only thing that would allow you to deviate from that would be something so severely at odds with your moral code and your moral compass that you would have to usurp that. And I did. And I have no regrets about that. I'm still doing it. So.
At this time, 1977, 78, where you're running Folsom, had you killed anybody in prison?
I've never killed anybody.
In prison?
Otherwise. You see, that's the thing that people don't understand about me. Even my commitment offense, I wasn't the shooter on that. You see, I'm the one that made it happen, but I wasn't the shooter.
Okay.
So in prison, I never had the necessity of taking life. My skill set is such that I didn't need to, even under the gun.
Wow. I don't know if you can answer this. If you can't, excuse me for crossing a line or a boundary.
Don't worry about that.
Did you ever give an order? Did you ever have to give an order?
I've never given an order to anybody that I wouldn't do myself. So anything that I ever gave an order on, I was involved in it. So if I said this needs to be done, I'd say you, and you, come with me. And then you engage. Mm-hmm. I've never assassinated anybody. Mm-hmm. Every altercation I was ever involved in was head up. One exception. I had 3 individuals who kidnapped a 12-year-old white girl, they were black, and held her at their house, actually during Christmas, over Christmas, sodomized her, raped her, and I initiated the stabbing of them myself. I was manacled, leg irons on, and I got the guard, who was cousin to one of our members, to let me in the tunnel when they were going to court. And he didn't take the restraints off me, but I had a knife, and I stabbed all 3. And I initiated that. And I was trying to kill them. I didn't succeed, but they did have to be medevaced out. That's the only exception.
Where was that?
That was in the San Bernardino County Jail.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
so, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point, is that, the Aryan Brotherhood and just the white guys in prison in general, really do not tolerate sex offenders within their ranks if they can help it, at least real ones, right?
Yeah.
Yet at that time, you're running prostitution in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see any kind of contradictions in that?
No, I don't. When you have those individuals that of their own volition are engaged in that activity, there's a distinction between that, someone who comes of their own volition, as opposed to somebody who's turned out.
Okay, so you weren't turning people out. Okay.
I don't do that. You see, it's not a question of I need to manifest whores, so you're going to be a whore. No, it's not like that. With those individuals who have that inclination and all the proclivities that go along with that, then of course you're now going to become a part of this stable, and that's one of your greatest sources of counterintelligence. You see, so pillow talk. And
by the way, you have a pimp cane. You have a very nice pimp cane right there.
I don't know that I would call that a pimp cane.
I'm just kidding.
That's elk, and that's American blackthorn, and that's mule deer.
It's absolutely beautiful. Did you make it yourself?
No, it was made for me.
Oh my God, it's gorgeous. You just said stable, so I wanted to make a pimp joke.
Yeah.
Right. So first of all, who wants to sell their body in prison as a convict? Who's doing
you want to
that?
remember that one of the primary factors associated with prison is survival, and survival for back then just referred to as homosexual as opposed to LGBTQ community.
Yeah, it's just a gay guy. He's
Right.
yeah.
So he wants to survive. So given his orientation and his choice relative to that, he's going to use his body as a commodity. And that's going to keep him safe. He's going to be protected, and he's going to have everything that he wants.
Okay. And are you simply just protecting these individuals? Are you collecting from them? Like, where do you guys come in?
Oh, they're in a stable. They're protected. They're all their needs are provided for.
Okay.
And sometimes they're even paid.
Okay.
Depending
Right.
on the situation. But if they're providing information or counterintelligence as it relates to the guards, you have those that get off the hook. I've known instances where a girl would orally copulate a guard, hold the semen in her mouth, and then collect that and use the DNA to prosecute that guard. And as an advantage towards leaving the prison system, going into the law enforcement community and saying, I've got this information on this guard, that type thing. So that's a rare instance,
Right.
But for the most part, they're protected. And as such, seen as a resource. And but for me, I used them primarily for intelligence and counterintelligence. So I would find out various conduits, feed that conduit information, see how it came back to me, and so on.
Okay. How many, at Folsom at this time, how many prostitutes did you guys have in your stable?
It varied depending on the transient characteristic
Yeah.
associated with moves,
Sure.
blocks. But typically you can count on a dozen,
Yeah. Wow.
in that. And that's not much for a population of 3,000.
Yeah. Right. Jeez. They were busy.
They were.
My goodness. With the guards too?
Oh, yes.
Male guards?
Yes, there were no female guards back then.
Right.
That changed in San Quentin.
Okay, so why were you transferred to San Quentin?
Well, when they brought the metal detectors into Old Folsom, and then I had learned how to beat them, when they brought the metal detectors in, they brought the National Guard in with minesweepers and metal detectors, and they cleared out all the weapons. I mean, everywhere. They found them all. And so what Black Panthers and BGF did is they went to the kitchen and they got steak bones. They had a butcher shop there. And, some of those T-bones, for instance, can be pretty long.
Sure.
They'd sharpen those down and they'd harden them with floor wax. So they can be lethal, but those were their weapons. But what they didn't know is that I had already had Charlie's girls bringing me the buck knives. I had 2 in, and then how to beat the metal detectors. So they didn't get the buck knives. So that when we went out to the yard and we engaged in combat, the presumption is that there were no actual knives. And so that in that particular day, Wendell and I stood back to back with 2 buck knives, and TD on his own was on the main line at that time. So he killed a man at the canteen that morning, and Wendell and I stabbed 16 BGF and Black Panther members. It was a bloodbath.
2 on 16.
Yeah. So no, it was actually 2 on more than that, but 16 is how many we stabbed.
And because you guys had the buck knives.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they had to bring the fire truck out in the yard to wash the blood out. There was so much blood. It was a bloodbath. So as a result of that, they didn't take Wendell, but they took TD, myself, Spotsburg, and Bobby Moore. And they put us in a car and they shot us to San Quentin. And so, when we got to San Quentin, that was an entirely different thing in place there. We only had 2 members there, and there was nothing really in place by way of infrastructure or otherwise. It was a stronghold for the Mexican Mafia. We had some associates there, and Mo Farrell, who was a Black Hand Mafia, shot me a kite and said he was going to hit Hawaiian John, who was an associate, in the morning. Told him don't do it. He did it anyway. And so TD and I went out to the yard and beat the hell out of Mo and a few other Emmy. And that created the potential for a war between the Emmy and the Mexican Mafia, and the Aryan Brotherhood. So we had a lot of other stuff going on too. Not the least of which was the assassination of Margot Compton, her 2 6-year-old twin daughters, and her boyfriend. And
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, well, that was a situation that was ordered out of Old Folsom by Buck Garrett, 1977. He had sent, Margot Compton was a witness for the feds and against Buck Garrett. She worked in one of his massage parlors. And so she testified against him for the feds. He got a 4-year sentence. The feds hid her out in Oregon. She got a hold of her connect in the Bay Area. She was a meth head. And, of course, the connect turned right around and gave her location to the Hells Angels. Buck Garrett sent 2 shooters, Psycho and Bug-Eye Bob McClure, up there. They went into it through a side door. Her boyfriend, Gary, was on the couch. They capped him in the head. They went into the bedroom. And Margot had 2 6-year-old twin daughters. And they wrapped their arms around their teddy bears. They held Margot, and they shot the little girls in the head. Then they shot Margot. The shooter on that was Bug-Eye Bob McClure. He was in San Quentin at the time that TD and I arrived, so my focus was on killing him. Unfortunately, the situation with the Mexican Mafia came up, and because that impacted upon the whole organization, it had to take priority. So I made arrangements for me to go down to L.A. County, where Joe Morgan was housed at the time in the jail there, and I was going to meet with him, and we were going to talk about this potential for war. On the way down there, I had an individual who got unruly, and I had to put him in the hospital. So they took him off the bus and put him in the hospital. They wouldn't let me into L.A. County Jail because when I got into it with this individual, the deputy threw down on me with his weapon, and I wouldn't stop until I was finished with what I was doing. I was chained up, and this individual wasn't. But I'd slipped my chains and used that chain with lock on the end to beat him down. And so when I got to L.A., they were upset with me. So they wouldn't let me get off at L.A. They took me over to Chino Palm Hall, which was the hole there. And ultimately, we brought Joe over to Palm Hall, where we negotiated the terms of a truce. And so that was really what was going on at San Quentin at the time. But because I left San Quentin and went down to Palm Hall, then we had a whole new dynamic there at Palm Hall.
Okay. So you didn't spend much time at San Quentin?
No, maybe a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you glad that you didn't go to war with the LMA, considering you guys were outnumbered?
That was irrelevant. As a point of business, it would have been foolhardy. And Joe realized that.
Well, because the MA and Mexican, the MA and the brand are known for being allies.
They are allies and always have been. But when you have a situation like that where they publicly get beaten down on the yard by the brand, now that infringes upon their reputation and the projection, their business, because if the brand's going to do that, who else can do it? Is the perception.
Right.
So it's something that has to be rectified, and was.
Okay.
So, the issue here is that a member of the Emmy was told not to do something and went contrary to that anyway, and that's what facilitated the problem.
Did you have to give up anything, pay any money? I mean, because you guys went out there.
No.
You put your hands on another made guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. In fact, the guy that I put my hands on was killed. So, that and a few other killings resolved the problem.
Right.
But nobody out of the brand.
Right. Okay. Wow. So now it's the 80s, and you're at Palm Hall. So that's Chino?
Yeah.
Colloquially known as Chino?
Yeah.
What was that like? What was Chino like?
Palm Hall was off the hook. So you had two tiers. That we had second tier and a third tier. There was a cement slab over the first tier, and that's where they kept protective custody and others. So, but the second tier was all brand, third tier was all Emmy. And so we went to the yard together. They gave us, there was different halls, what they call halls within the facility of Chino itself, the reception center. So you had units. And Madrone was the last one, and they actually had a yard, physical yard, where they were allowed to visit. Well, we took that over. And now we were using that to have contact visits with our family and our associates. So we had a lot of smuggling going on at that time. We had a lot of babies born at that time.
Yeah.
And a lot of drug trafficking going on at that time. We also used that opportunity to develop the infrastructure. So we had approximately 6-7 individuals who are all brand members now. And the idea come up of forming a commission in California. And we did. And I was elected to that commission along with TD. And it went back and forth between Wendell and Bobby Crane at that time. And then we went into the feds and did the same thing with a federal commission.
Okay, explain the commission.
Commission was that the entire body of the Aryan Brotherhood, both state and federal, elected a 3-man commission to oversee the activities of the organization. So they would now determine who would come in as a member and what the activities of the organization would engage, and on what level, and who would be in charge of them, and so on. So it's like the officers of a corporation or the board of directors,
Right.
depending on how you choose to look at it. As you know, in a corporation, you can be on the board as well as be an officer. So,
And that includes the feds and state.
Yes.
Okay. So at this time, Barry Mills is in the feds. Have they started these big investigations, these federal investigations inside of California prisons yet?
They have, but only as it relates to the Nuestra Familia. They were the first to be targeted by the feds for RICO.
Okay.
But not as it relates to the brand. The Hells Angels had been targeted, but they had been unsuccessful in their attempts to RICO prosecute the Hells Angels. They actually lost. Not so with the Nuestra Familia. But the interesting thing with the Nuestra Familia is that in their indictments, they brought administrators within the prison into the fold by way of being members or associated with the Nuestra Familia. And that was the first time that had happened in that. And they were quite successful in it. The prosecutions against the Aryan Brotherhood didn't come till much later. And that's when a lot of the publicity associated with the murders of people on the street, as well as people inside, became public knowledge. and they realized that they needed to do something to essentially attempt to cut the head off the snake.
So at what point does the brand go from this highly profitable prison organization taking money off of yards through all these rackets to expanding onto the street?
That would have occurred really functionally in the 80s. So you figure it just started really when I made the decision to step away.
Oh, really? So you didn't have a part in that?
No. I set up the infrastructure. And that was one of the reasons when I stepped away that, I made the decision to work with law enforcement. I was responsible for evolving, if you will, the infrastructure of the brand. So I felt I had a responsibility to address it in some capacity. That capacity represented the taking of innocent lives.
And that was obviously strictly against your moral code.
Oh, yes.
Was that written into the laws of the organization itself?
There are no written laws. I hear people talk about that all the time. Even having a brand on you, like the shamrock on my finger, that was iffy. You didn't allow individuals coming in. You see it now. They've got the shamrock on their chest with a 666 or a swastika or whatever it is. Back then, we didn't advertise. See, once you were validated and they knew you were who you were, then it really didn't matter. But if you could maneuver within the system, if you could what we refer to as a sleeper, then that was advantageous to the organization.
You were obviously not a sleeper at this point.
No.
When you hit Chino. You were validated.
Yes.
Okay. But you were on the main line?
No, in the hole.
Okay, you're still in the hole.
Yeah.
But obviously wielding tremendous power. It sounds like you guys had the run of things.
Yes.
If you control the whole visiting area, essentially.
I'll give you an absurd example. We would have visiting on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, in that yard I was telling you about at Madrone. And so we would go out and families would come in and they would bring whatever they wanted, really. Baby bottles full of whiskey and you name it. So the party would go on all day. And because I didn't drink or use drugs, by the end of the day, I always brought a flat cart with me. And what I would do is I would pick up the unconscious members of the ME and the brand and load them onto that cart and push them back, put them on my shoulder, carry them up to their cell, and put them in their cell. That's how absurd it was.
Yeah.
The lieutenant that ran our unit used to ride his Harley Davidson down Center Corridor. I mean...
Try that one now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not happening. So at any rate, and that's oftentimes what people really don't understand when I talk about prison and the way prison was back then. They see it within the lens of today or even the last couple of decades, and it doesn't apply at all.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about having a head-up confrontation with somebody where you could be in a knife fight, that doesn't exist anymore. Everything now is about assassination. Much, much different.
So at this time, you're supposed to go see the board. You've got a 7 to life sentence. By the time you got to Chino, Palm Hall, had you been to see the board of parole yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you were obviously denied.
Yes.
Had you thought about trying to get out at this point?
No.
Okay. So you haven't become conscious of that yet. You're still living in the moment.
No, it's a situation where when I did make the decision to step away, the difficulty in that was that by way of example, when they brought me out, they put me in a big room, and that room was full of law enforcement. ATF, FBI, state agencies, sheriffs, and so on, all wanted intel. And that's when I made the decision that that's not happening as it relates to this, this, and this. If innocent life was taken, you have my cooperation. You want intelligence? Okay, we can talk about that. Again, that responsibility for building it. So, when you think about that, it's just a shift in the paradigm, nothing more. I really couldn't give them anything that the brand couldn't take and just shift that paradigm and move into a new arena. That's not that difficult. Mm-hmm. So, but it is, they wanted to know how I beat metal detectors. They wanted to know, how certain things occur, and I didn't have a problem with that. So I would use myself as an example, and I would do training films for them, to facilitate educating law enforcement. Then I made that step into the arena of the public and educating the public. I went on a lecture tour, much as Renee did. Mm-hmm. And
what year did you leave the brand?
83.
Okay. And why did you choose to do that?
Because I won't condone the taking of innocent life.
Can you tell us what that was about?
I told you about Margot Compton.
Right.
The other one was Steve Barnes and his father. And so the issue there is that once we had formed the commission, the discussion became whether or not to kill. We couldn't get to Steve Barnes, so the issue was to kill his wife and his daughter, his parents. I couldn't believe the conversation I was hearing. This went totally contrary to so-called warrior code. Mm-hmm. And what was happening is that there were a couple of individuals who had killed a guy on the yard there at Palm Hall, and they were being prosecuted. Steve stepped away from the brand and began cooperating with law enforcement on that case. So, like I said, because they couldn't get to him, then the idea was to take out his family. And so in that discussion, there was a vote on it, a 3-man vote, and I voted against it, and the other 2 outvoted me. So it became set. With that, I actually looked for a way. I used this in my training, actually, but I looked for a way to re-divert everyone's attention. So I planned an escape attempt out of San Bernardino, brought Joe Morgan and all of the brand and the Emmy over to San Bernardino County Jail. I facilitated cutting out the doors of all the cells and the back bars, and we all went out and we're standing out there and cutting through the last bars on the window that went out to the river, had a contact waiting for us. We're going to Belize, and just then a young officer had it in mind to bring an explorer in to show him around. But in that, when they come in, I'd monitored the whole thing. When they come in one side, they have 10 minutes to come around to the other side and check in with control. And if they don't do that, then there's a response as a result, thinking something's wrong. And I knew that. So when he came in, of course, everybody wanted to kill him and the explorer. I told him, you're not doing that. Everybody back in your cell. So I sent everybody back to their cell. And, of course, I stayed out on a tier with this young deputy and this explorer, told him, call your watch commander. So watch commander come in, and the interesting thing about that is that just hours prior to that, the watch commander had come to my cell. I was in the in cell, and where I'd cut out the bars, he put his hand on that and was telling me, well, I was told you guys were intelligent, but you're just a bunch of thugs. And I said, yes, sir, we are. And so he went on his way, and a couple hours later, we made that escape attempt. So now he come back to thank me for not killing his officer and that explorer, because he knew that could have happened. But I wasn't going to allow that to happen.
First of all, how were you able to get all of these heads of the MA, Joe Morgan, and all of these big-time gang leaders? How were you able to get them down to San Bernardino County?
It's something that I developed starting at the time that I brought Joe Morgan over from Los Angeles County Jail to Palm Hall. The issue there was utilizing cases that people had, active cases in that county, to bring witnesses over. So we would subpoena them, and through the subpoena process, bring them in. Now everybody's together. And so you make this mass move. I actually looked at an escaped attempt, having somebody from the outside come into the prison and cut the outside windows out, and then the bars, we would cut our bars out and then go out that way. But the San Bernardino County Jail was, I think, more practical. In that.
How were you guys? What did you guys use to cut open the bars?
Hacksaw blades.
And how were those procured?
The same way you do knives or guns, you smuggle them in and beat the metal detectors, of course.
Oh, in the vault?
Oh, yeah.
You vault those. You keister those.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So what thwarted this attempt?
The officer and this explorer coming in while we were at the back window getting ready to leave. There wasn't enough time to cut out that last bar.
I see.
And I knew it. So.
And what was the plan? So, and kind of speaks to the man you are, if I may. You could have killed these guys and fled, made the escape.
I don't think so. No, no, it's a misnomer. The whole idea I shut it down was because I knew there wasn't enough time to get that bar out. So to kill them would have just been futile.
Right.
I mean, why kill these individuals when you're not going to get the bar out? They're going to respond. You're going to have to deal with this response team, you see, and you're not going to get out that window.
What was the plan if you could have gotten out?
We had a contact set up. This window overlooked the river. To go out the river, come up the other side, we'd be picked up. We had a boat waiting to go to Belize, and we would have gone to Belize and then from there restructured.
Do you think you would have restructured as in like?
Organized crime.
Organized crime?
Yeah.
In Belize?
Yeah.
Why Belize?
It was isolated, no extradition policy, and you could stay low key. We had a number of individuals with us, of course, that spoke Spanish, and so it was a logical choice.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could have spread out into Central America,
right? Especially
at that time.
Well, look at your cartels today.
Yeah.
You see, and back then they were just formulating. So, that potential existed relative to the cocaine trade. And, now it's the methamphetamine trade, coming through from China into Mexico and then to the cartels.
Yeah.
And then into the United States.
So had your decision to leave precluded this escape attempt? Your decision to leave the brand?
I actually developed, to answer your question, yes. I had it in mind. I mean, my elders had come to see me prior to coming down to Palm Hall and essentially busted my bones, told me, look, this is not the way you were raised. Choose. And so that was in my mind, and that was already there. But truth be told, had it not been for the plan and the idea of taking innocent life, I probably would have stayed with the organization, regardless of what my elders told me. But, that had planted the seed, and certainly that was there. But with the killing of Steve Barnes's father, that was kind of like the escape attempt didn't work. The execution of Steve Barnes's father was carried out.
So they went ahead with it.
Yeah. And I said, that's it. So I stepped away.
And how do you defect? How did that work?
I called the lieutenant down to the back door of my cell in San Quentin, which I'd gone back to.
Okay.
And said, I need you to get a hold of somebody in Sacramento. I'm going to step away. They didn't believe it because I was in control, and so they didn't believe it. So, they brought in polygraph examiners and now they want intelligence, they want this, they want that. So I gave them San Quentin insofar as that intel, insofar as weapons, and I had a gun and different things. And of course, they didn't like the fact that I had a gun. But that adds credibility to what you're doing, of course. And so then it was a matter of, when they found out that I had defected, they took me up to New Miller Hospital, put me in a wing by myself. And then when it became clear to the brand that I had defected, they said they received intel that they were going to rush the hospital to kill me. And so they moved me out to a one-of-a-kind unit in Tehachapi called the Restricted Housing Unit. And Mundo was there. And there's only 6 of us in this unit. And it was run by the Special Services Unit. And oversight was provided by the associate warden and no other contact. So
there's no getting to you there?
No.
Were you required to give up info? Because I know back then I've heard that it was a lot harder to PC up, so, as they say.
Yeah. No, I don't think you're required to give up info. The debriefing process, I never went through a debriefing process. I actually did that with other law enforcement agencies, towards their intel gathering. The main thing they were interested in was my counterintelligence and how I use that. And the main thing that I pointed out to them was their lack of sharing between agencies and how that placed them at a disadvantage and placed me at an advantage. So then it was a matter of instruction relative to that. Metal detection, no big thing.
When you say counterintelligence, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's not something that typically comes up when you talk about gangs. But it is something that comes up within the construct of organized crime. And it seemed prudent to me to utilize resources that law enforcement were using to identify them and then feed them misinformation. The problem with that is that when I stepped away, that misinformation came back to haunt me because they now thought this was the intel that they had and it was all false. And I tried to point that out to them. They, no, man, we got this. I said, yeah, here's how I gave it to them.
Yeah.
You see, and then they finally snapped and realized. But it was, the killing of guards is really what brought it home for them to understand that what I was telling them was the truth, and that I was legitimate about my desire to step away and contend with this idea of taking innocent life. So in that context, Tommy Silverstein and Clay killed 2 guards, actually 3, up in Marion, Illinois. But I told them that was going to happen, and they disregarded it.
How did you know that? Because they had to vote on it? They had to ask the commission?
No. It was, it need-to-know basis. So on a need-to-know basis, these things are coming, but you're not handling it because it's in the feds. You're not voting on it because it's in the feds, but you still know about it because of the repercussions associated with it. And there were repercussions. The killing of brand members, headshots on the yard, otherwise setting them up.
Right.
You see that retaliation. But the rule had always been you don't put hands on staff.
Right.
Because of the repercussions. So it's bad for business. In this case, I told them this was coming. The whole dynamic was changing. It was going to change in the state too, in my opinion. It did. They did drive-by shootings on guards on the freeway, in their homes, and so on. In this case, it was in the feds, and they took the life. Tommy Silverstein was having problems with the guard, and so when the guard brought him out, Tommy backed up to a cell. They took the cuffs off, gave him a bone crusher. He butchered the man on the tier. His son was also a guard standing at the grill gate watching his father being slaughtered. And Tommy cut his head off and rolled the head to the father to the son. And that changed the perception and created a dynamic shift in the paradigm within law enforcement. Now they knew that this was real. Unfortunately, those guards had to die to facilitate that.
And you warned them?
I warned them.
That this exact thing was going to happen?
Yes, and they even polygraphed me on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So even before, had you dropped out at the time that you warned them?
Yes.
Okay. How were you able to know that was going to happen if you had already dropped out?
No, it was happening. The dynamic was happening before I dropped out.
Oh, I see. So you were...
I had the information.
Okay. That these guys, that Tommy Silvestri was...
The guards were going to be killed.
Oh, wow.
In the feds. And it changed everything. That's how come it's going to come to the state. It starts in the feds, but it's going to come to the state because of the repercussions. Once that starts, once the retaliation starts and life is taken, it's a life for a life, or 3 lives for a life. You see?
Wow.
That's how it works.
And does it remain that way to this day?
Yes.
So guards are legitimate targets now?
Yes.
If it's seen as like retaliatory?
Not just that, not just the retaliatory factor, but if they're infringing, if they're encroaching on the revenue gathering of the organization.
Wow. And obviously, none of that was okay with you.
No. That, to me, is taking of innocent life.
Yeah.
I know a lot of guards, even to this day, and a lot of people in law enforcement, they're just doing their job. The same way I, as a gang member, am doing my job. But there's a line there, in my opinion, that you don't cross. That's a family man. That's somebody's father. That's somebody's uncle, so on. You see? If they're in the mix, as it relates to the gang, that's an entirely different thing.
Right.
But they're not in the mix. They're a civil servant working on behalf of the public to provide a service, a civil service.
If they're bringing in stuff for you?
Different. They're in the mix.
Okay. But these guards that were killed at Marion weren't in the mix?
No.
Yeah, that's wrong.
It is. And that's not a moral judgment. It's an observation.
Yeah.
You see? That's wrong.
Correct. So you're debriefed and...
No, I didn't debrief.
Or what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, what they did is that they took me to Tehachapi and in that special unit there. And then we had the Stephen Barnes case, and I went and testified in that case. Then we had the Margot Compton case, and I went and testified in that case.
As like an expert witness, or as you had actual information?
I had actual information.
Okay.
And I did testify in other cases where I was an expert witness, on the brand. When they came at me about the RICO prosecution, I declined. And
the feds came to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Why did you decline that?
Because I knew that the individuals that they were using as witnesses to testify against the brand and testify about their alleged activities were lies. And I was aware of it, what was being said, what the intel was, and otherwise, and I told them that. I said, the individual you are using are lying. I'm not going to be a part of that. It's that simple. So they said, well, we'll consider you on our team anyway. And I said, no, you won't. No, you won't. And so they attempted to discredit me as a result of that, by saying that I had made the allegation that the brand was not racist, and that discredited me. But this was made by an individual that now we're in the 90s and knew nothing about the 70s.
Right.
So.
Okay. So what did this kind of cooperation do for you in terms of the parole board?
Nothing. I wouldn't allow it to be considered. Parole board didn't know anything about it.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah, I didn't. When I stepped away, I did an additional 38 years.
I wanted to ask you that. So where did all that time come from? You never, when you're at Tehachapi, you're not getting in trouble anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm not. But I'm not interested in 30 pieces of silver. I'm not interested in giving up information to get out. That's not why I did it. I did it because I believed it was the right thing to do. Again, that's a warrior's code.
Yeah.
You see, so I'll do my time. And that's not why I'm doing this. I wouldn't even allow it to be discussed.
Wow.
So, and I had to address that in going before juries. Same thing. And I would tell them the same thing.
I'm not doing this to get out.
No, this isn't about going before the board or I want out or...
There's been no deal made with the DA.
No deal made, no special treatment. My life became miserable as a result because now I got dirty guards after me and I got the gangs after me and anybody else in between that they can get to come at me. Last attempt on my life was in 2015. And that was in a sensitive needs yard. See?
Wow, what happened?
Well, the individual received a call from Pelican Bay, Emmy, and he was going to use a bone crusher, but they told him, don't use it, he'll take it away from you. And so he used a box cutter instead, closer to the hand. And but I'd worked a double shift. I was sitting on a bench, helping a guy that was going to go to the board the next morning. I was tired, too tired. He came up from behind me, did a roundhouse kick, took me off the back of the bench. I went semi-unconscious. I couldn't see, but I could still hear. He grabbed me by the hair, reached in to cut my throat. I blocked it. He cut my ear off. Doctor sewed it back on, is why you can still see it. Choked up on my hair again, came in deeper, I think to get the windpipe. I blocked it again. He got the back of my throat at the anterior artery, missed it by 1 millimeter. And the third time when he choked up, I got my eyesight back, took the weapon away from him. And in a nanosecond, it occurred to me I was going to break his neck. But I heard my wife's voice. And she said, no, Sky. And so I had been advocating and preaching nonviolence.
Right.
So, wow. It was a matter of practicing what you preach.
But again, it's that warrior, it's that true power that we talked about at the beginning where The true power is actually letting a man that you've bested, who you
Yes.
can kill, letting him live.
Yes.
That's like real mercy.
It is, but it's you have to be able to see and know instinctually, because as men we function off instinct, not intuition. That's for women. But as it relates to our instinct, the idea is that do I need to take this life? And you don't have to think about that. It comes second nature. If that's your training, if that's innate within you, then it's not something you think about. In this case, it took my wife's voice to trigger that.
Your intuition.
My wife's voice.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. That's so, that shows you the state of certain inmates. I mean, because he would have been caught for that.
Oh,
Had
yeah.
he killed
I mean,
you.
it was right out in the day room, and staff responded, and one staff member was standing up on the second tier watching the whole thing and actually documented it.
Yeah.
And said exactly what happened, and that I took the weapon away and stopped there.
And by 2015, you're no spring chicken.
No, I'm 65 at that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My uncle always said, look, if a young man tries to fight me, he's because I know I'm going to get hurt. I'm trying to kill him.
Yeah.
So what were some other, you said dirty guards tried to tried to get at you? How did that?
Set up numerous times. They bring you into a unit, put you in a cell. Suddenly your cell door opens and two other cell doors open and four guys come out or two guys come out, whatever. Now you're on the tier. The gunners suddenly disappeared, no longer to be seen. And so you got to fight for your life.
And you had to do that?
Oh, yeah.
Against four guys?
Oh, yeah.
With what?
My hands.
And they've got steel with them? Or?
Not always, no.
Okay.
No, not always.
But I'm sure they're planning to try to beat you until you're...
Yeah, they just stomp you out if they can.
Now, that dynamic, those guards, that's the brand getting to them?
Yes. But also, administrators who think that I'm going to tell on them, you see, they want to quiet me.
Because your association with them
Yes.
still persists?
Yes.
Like they're still...
Well, I still got all that in the memory bank, and there's a whole lot of it. But I told you, that's not my function.
Right.
I have no interest in that. They eventually understood that
Right.
and left me alone. Wow. But it took a minute.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so that's obviously not as fun living that way as it was at Folsom.
No, I mean, I actually had associate wardens and a captain that were members of the Hells Angels. And so when I was going up to testify against the Hells Angels, they tried a number of things. They tried to discredit me. The associate warden went up and testified for the defense, but I wasn't credible. They called me into their office one day, and they had my wife on a speakerphone. And just then, two Hells Angels roared up on their motorcycles with the intent of killing her. The idea was that if I go testify, tell them now I'm not going to testify and they won't kill her. So I said, hold on a minute. I picked up another phone. I called Sonny Barger, told him what was happening. He said, Mike, I didn't condone that. So I pulled out my address book and I started reading off his name and other members' names and their families. I said, your call, Sonny. You know me. Go ahead and kill her. He said, oh, no, Mike, no, Mike, no, Mike. I said, all right. It was a bluff, of course.
Yeah.
Calculated bluff. But my wife didn't appreciate it. That's just one instance. Of what you deal with. Then you have the Senate Select Committee that's investigating gladiator fights at the same place. Mm-hmm. You see that, I'm the only inmate, prisoner, convict whose name comes up in that investigation. And in that, there was a captain involved, and with the gladiator fights, I was aware of a situation where an individual was shot in the head by a guard who had no business being up in the tower with the gun, but the day before, the prisoner had spit in his face, so they set him up. And so I went to the lieutenant at that time and told him it was a setup. He investigated it, found out it was true, and took the paperwork that I had provided to him relative to that to the feds. That initiated a Senate Select Committee investigation into it. They did a drive-by shooting on this captain's. He was promoted to captain on his house. He had to retire because they went to his house and beat him down.
Who's they? People associated with this guard?
Yes, other guards.
Did a drive-by on his house.
Yeah.
Was there...
He appeared before the Senate Select Committee, and Gloria Romero, who was the chairman at that time, she's now a United States senator, but she was a state senator at that time. She said, excuse me. She stopped the proceedings, and she said, I need to know, are you wearing a bulletproof vest? And he said, yes, I am. And so she said, why? So he broke it down for her, the drive-by, the whole thing.
Were they convicted?
No. No.
What prison did this happen at?
Corcoran.
What year did this happen?
1996.
The corruption is stunning.
Oh, you have no idea.
I know I don't.
You have no idea.
I've only scratched the surface of it.
Yeah.
People can't believe because it's just the best place in the world, the state of California. I think people are shocked by how corrupt it is.
They should be shocked.
I'm shocked because I'm from Oregon and California is this like.
Well, Oregon is where I testified against the Hells Angels. See, and they were brand new. I mean, Mike Graham was the detective that took over the case. And ultimately, the information I provided to him that he knew was true because that information wasn't available to the public. So it opened up a cold case. Case went back to 1977. This is the 90s. But this is the most tenacious individual I have ever met in my life. He followed up on that, and he facilitated convictions for Buck Garrett, who ordered the hit, and the shooter, Bug-Eye Bob McClure. 4 consecutive life sentences for both men.
And that's just to remind people, that's for killing Margot
Compton, or two twin 6-year-old girls, and her boyfriend, Gary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just by my estimation, amazing. Just tenacious. Mm-hmm. Oh, my goodness. But he didn't give up. And he was threatened with his own life and his family's life.
Wow.
You see?
This prosecutor.
Yeah, no, this detective.
Right. This detective, a cop.
Yeah, he's retired now. Wow. But he went through it. And I have the utmost respect and admiration for what he did.
Yeah. Yeah, those people need to be put away for doing stuff like that. Now, throughout all of these years, after you left the organization and you're testifying and there's these attempts on your life, are you getting, how many board appearances do you make?
18.
18 board appearances. Why are you rejected, especially as you're getting older? What are these rejections for?
Well, one, because I won't admit to my commitment offense. That's the biggest one. But saddled with that is the idea that I still deal with to this day. The allegation is that I continue to be an active leader of the Aryan Brotherhood, and that everything that I've done is just a snow screen to hide my activities. I hear it all the time. We know you're dirty, Thompson. We just can't catch you. And that's unfortunate. But that's the reality amongst some law enforcement personnel.
They're still saying that.
Yeah, the vast majority ask me to work with them, ask me to teach them. I provide workshops. I provide instruction. I do seminars. I'm a presenter speaker at gang conferences. I work with probation departments insofar as their safety and security within a controlled environment. I do the same thing with sheriff departments. But you're always going to have those old salts that take that position that I'm dirty.
And, well, I don't blame them. Well, at least I don't blame the Board of Parole, knowing, if you know anything about the sophistication of real OGs like you, maybe they thought you were a plant. It was to gain information to then pass on to the brothers.
Would have been a good one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but that's it's a little far. It's a little much.
Not really, because I did a critique of the 1984 Olympics, VIP, foreign dignitaries. So they took me out as a VIP, and I critiqued their security. And I blasted them on it because I was able to put holes in it. I mean, they had air coverage, just to give you an example. And so the convoy, huge convoy, we go in, we circle up the convoy to regas the air coverage. Well, that's predictable. If you know that they're using a B-series helicopter, you know that it has to be regassed. So at some point in the destination, you're going to have to convoy up. I set out snipers, knowing that. And so when they convoyed up, my snipers engaged, and all they had was short order arms. So I blew them out of the water.
It's funny that it takes guys like you, like all of these brains in law enforcement can't figure that out.
I think they can, but they have to have a reference point. You see, and that's the difficulty. If you don't have a reference point, and I have the reference point, it's called survival.
Right. And you don't admit, well, at least you didn't, well, no, you don't admit to being the killer of the two individuals. Did you take responsibility for giving the order, though? Or did
Absolutely.
you? Okay. They just wanted to hear, you just weren't telling them.
Yeah, what happened was that the actual shooter, when he became eligible for parole, he was paroled before me. He actually went before the board. In his testimony under oath, said that he was the actual shooter and that I had nothing to do with that.
Right.
So did that make a difference? No.
Yeah, no, clearly. How did you get caught? You buried these bodies?
Yes, they were buried.
Okay. Did you have a hand in burying them?
Yes.
Okay. Did somebody told, or how do you get?
Yeah, essentially what it came down to is you had a young lady that, well, I say a young lady, my sister, who was charged with, what is it when you write bad checks?
Yeah, check fraud.
Check fraud.
Yeah.
And so she had information about my participation in this and gave that to law enforcement. That started an investigation.
Wow. Have you forgiven her for that?
Forgiven.
Have you made peace with it? That's really the better way.
I made peace with it at the time.
Uh-huh.
You know, I don't take issue with survival. And, you know, she saved her husband. She saved herself. She had kids. I don't take issue with that.
Did you ever have a relationship with her again?
Yes.
Okay.
She's my sister.
Wow.
You see?
Yeah. What a fascinating individual you are.
Oh, thank you.
So what year you got paroled when? 2020?
It was actually the end of 2019.
Okay.
But 2020 is, I round off,
Yeah, sure.
you know, depending on which is closer to.
Why do you think they let you out this time?
I think that the commissioner the board commissioner, his name is Randy Grounds. And I knew Randy when he came in as a CEO. He became a warden, then he became a commissioner on the board. He was old school, and he's the real deal. He listened, but he also knew me. And so, you know, normally when I went into the board, I knew what was going to happen, so I had no expectations. I didn't anticipate release, and this was the case this time also. So I went in, and Randy was there, and I was just going to take my ID card out of my pocket, as I usually did, and put it on the table, turn around, and walk out. And Randy said, he saw it, and he said, Mike, you want a cup of coffee? And I said, sure. So I sat down, and they brought a cup of coffee, and we had coffee, and we talked for 8 hours. And he asked me questions that no one had ever asked me about why I did what and when and how, and he knew that I was telling him the truth. And that's really all he was concerned with, is that I was authentic in who I was projecting myself to be. Just that. And whether or not, of course, I posed a threat to the public. And in his estimation, I did not. So they sent me out, and they brought me back in, and he stood up, and he reached over the table and shook my hand, and he said, I'm going to let you go. Wow. And then he walked around the table, and he shook my hand again, and he said, you're a very humble man. He said, if you'll embrace that humility daily, he said, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I'm beholden to Randy. You know, he's, by my estimation, Of course, he did the right thing, but it's not just me that he's helped. He's done this with other individuals that really stood no chance of ever getting out. But he used that experience, that body of experience that he had coming through the department to know what's real and what's not. And has let not only myself go, but others go.
Yeah.
And, of course, Governor Newsom, he could have stopped it, but he didn't. And, the California District Attorneys Association, in my case, opposed that the governor let me go. And because I was released under the Youthful Offender Act and the Elder Offender Act.
What is that?
Well, the Youthful Offender Act is when you're under the age of, in my case, I was 21. I was 20 at the time of the crime. That the mind does not have the
frontal lobe.
Does not have the capacity to develop fully, to mature. And so that as it relates to your judgment in the commission of a crime, that may be a factor that should be considered. In my case, given the circumstances of my commitment offense and my involvement in it, I qualified for the Youthful Offender Act. Then it was up to the board to determine whether or not I met the criteria. Randy and his deputy commissioner made the determination that I met the criteria. That's what the conversation was about. And so having met the criteria, they released me under the Youthful Offender Act. And because I met the criteria for the Elder Offender Act, also, I was released under that also. So,
and that's if you're at a certain age, they deem you not
over 65.
Yeah.
So I was at 65. What was I? I was at 70 at that point. The District Attorneys Association took issue with that. So they took steps to ensure that they could attempt to repeal that by going after me again, and did.
How so?
Well, they charged me with EDD fraud and not checking the box on a loan application to the SBA that said I was on parole, and convicted me of it, and I did an additional 10 months and just got out 2 months ago.
Get the f*** out of here.
I'm serious.
So you got out and you were released in 2019. You're married, so you went with your wife and in the town that you live in, and you started a business. You're a writer. You've got a media company. All this stuff.
I had a nonprofit. I was attempting to put in place a fire abatement structure. Unfortunately, I had a business partner who was corrupt, and all the heavy equipment I purchased in my wife's name and the $100,000 that she put up toward the business, he extorted. He defrauded us. So by the time I found that out, we informed law enforcement of it, and they turned around and did an investigation on me relative to that, determined that I had committed EDD fraud and that I had made this loan application even though it wasn't processed.
What's EDD again?
Unemployment.
Okay.
I represented myself. They charged me with 33 charges and all felony charges. I represented myself, brought that down to 5, and they said that I had defrauded the homeless. Never happened. They just wanted, that was a press release that the District Attorneys Association put out. They were trying to make me the poster boy. This is what happens when you release a person under the Youthful Offender Act.
Right.
So at any rate, I felt it was, even though I did 10 months, they were trying to make me do 15 years, 10 of which I would have had to serve, so I would have died in prison. So I felt that my representing myself was successful. It took me 3 years. And like I said, brought the charges down to what I did, and I did 10 months.
In California?
Yeah.
It's a state charge.
Yeah. Just got out 2 months ago.
Did you have any funk in there for who you are?
Always. Always. I'm on a non-designated yard, so there's active members.
What's this institution?
Kern.
Well, it's a real prison.
It is. Kern Valley. You know, had an individual that was stabbed 101 times by 2 other individuals, white,
Yeah.
Signature move. I won't get into the particulars because it's under investigation. Just like I won't get into any more into this crime I'm telling you about that I just served time on because it's under appeal. There's also a Racial Justice Act contention in it because me being the active leader of the Aryan Brotherhood was advocated on behalf of the prosecution, and that's why it remains alive.
Wow. Jeez, they just won't let a soldier just.
I'm not a soldier.
Warrior. You're a podcaster now.
I am.
Welcome to the family. You're a YouTuber.
Thank you. Yes, I am.
They just won't let him be.
That's it.
However, you're doing pretty well for a guy that just came off of 38 years.
45.
Oh my goodness. You served 45 years from
1973 to 2019.
Oh my God. I mean, what do I really ask you? What do you say to that? Do you have any regrets?
None, other than not having children.
That is the wisest thing for anybody watching this. Well, this is incredible, man. There's more questions I want to ask you just writ large about the Aryan Brotherhood. So we'll do just a little bonus episode after this if you're okay with that. But I just want to, this is heavy for me. So I just want to sit for a little bit. And I want to promote Warhorse.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Of course. I want to promote your channel. I want to promote you. And I want, law enforcement watching this to book you. And, because you're on the circuit. You're in demand. So
I just came back from San Diego at the San Diego Gang Conference where I was a presenter speaker. And I have a business called Asymmetric Threat Dynamics that deals with the very thing that I addressed at the gang conference. And I am being contacted by various law enforcement agencies, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
But the approach here is not just to monetize my experience, but to give value to that body of experience toward the benefit of not only law enforcement, but the public at large.
Yeah. Law enforcement, we like. We don't like DAs.
I'm not a big fan, but I have known a few that are retired now that I work with now.
Yeah.
Especially in these workshops that I like and that I know and believe are good people. Mm-hmm. And I know others that are, former Homeland Security that I have on my board of directors.
Well, there you go. We just need them to be better. We just need more ethical ones. So let's talk about Warhorse. Where can they get Warhorse? 45 years in prison and the remarkable life of Michael Thompson.
It's, you can get the paperback from Synchrony Press, synchronypress.com, and you can get the ebook on Amazon, either one. And this is book one of 3 books. And I would advocate anybody that has the desire to read it, that in reading it, to provide feedback. There's a lot of information in there, but the feedback, I think, is always important. It goes towards furthering that education. This is not an educational book. This is a memoir. Yeah. So it talks about, my growing up, how I grew up, what my self-efficacy is, how that's evolved, who I am as a human being. And of course, the war stories are in there. You can't get away from them. I don't like glorifying that, but they have value because they provide a reference point.
That's right. Well, hopefully somebody's watching this from behind the wall. And if you're a part of the AB or you're in that world and you read this book, maybe, you'll do the right thing.
That'd be great.
So, Michael Thompson, I would say I'm honored, but that would be an understatement. Thank you so much for coming down here.
Pleasure's mine.
You got it. All right, you guys, we'll see you very soon. Thanks so much.